Welcome back to the SMITE Pro League here in Season 9. One game remaining on this SPL Saturday, and is the Kings versus the Titans going toe-to-toe. And this is actually a great segue, J-Mac. It is spooky season after all. And so many people are going to go to Halloween dressed as an alien. And the question so many are, what does an alien wear? You know, if I'm making my alien costume, what does an alien wear? Alien wear.
What does he wear?
What does an alien wear? Well, an alien might not wear state-of-the-art gear, high-tech computer gear and peripherals, but you at home can play on high-tech gear and peripherals as well. If you head on over to smitegame.com/alienware and use code AWSMITE09 for discounts on select Alienware gear, and find the answer that all of us have been searching for in this Halloween season, and it is exactly what an alien wears for those Halloween costumes. Thanks again to Alienware for being with us here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. A bit of a miss there by Dave, admittedly, but I gave it my best. My name is Dolson. J-Mac joins me on the desk for the Kings versus the Titans.
We need to buy you an actual Segway. I don't know why that came into my mind, but we need to get you one. They sell them on Amazon.
Today would be a great day to have one because I'm walking back and forth.
It would be really nice for you to have one.
Scooter right on over there.
Easy transition. An easy Segway.
You're right. With Prime, I get it shipped to me easily. That's unbelievable.
And they do sell them on Amazon. They do sell them.
Unbelievable to me. I can't believe that I can do that. But you too at home can as well. J-Mac, first set of the day it was the Dragons up against the Valkyries. The Dragons look convincing as always. I think after last weekend, their fans probably not super concerned with the future of this team, realizing that eventually the win streak was going to come to a close. When you're trying those types of compositions, eventually it does not work out. So one more game remaining here on this Saturday after we started off with the Jade Dragons against the Valhalla Valkyries. Titans versus Kings up next, and then a triple header as always on Sunday. So 4 sets remaining here, J-Mac. Which one catches your eye the most?
I think for me, it's going to come down to probably this set and then the Kings and Leviathans. Yeah. I think there's a lot to be asked for out of the Bolts. They've been struggling a lot so far this phase, have not been able to find much success. I think they're only sitting at a single set win so far, and that was up against the Solar Scarabs. They went the full 2-1 distance against to get the win there. Lost to the Valkyries. So I think for me, I definitely want to watch this Bolts Dragon set very closely because I think this is a very big match for the Olympus Bolts. They need to be able to show that they can still compete at the top level. But it's just been such a struggle for those guys. I think keeping eyes on the Camelot Kings to see how they're able to kind of climb themselves up the standings, bring themselves back after their Masters runner-up championship at the very least there is definitely another team to keep eyes on.
Yeah, and so the Kings now trying to match the Jade Dragons atop the standings here in the SPL, getting very close to the end of our first round robin. Remember, with 8 teams, once every team gets to 7 games played, that means everyone has played everyone once. And so we're starting to get there. A couple more matches remaining for a few of the teams. The Tartarus Titans going up against the Kings for the first time this phase. And the Titans, a team that, like, at points throughout the year, get a bit experimental. You know, we're wondering where the headspace is at for this squad, but always feeling motivated to win, just maybe in multifaceted ways. And, of course, it's a guy sitting in the middle of the team there in Paul, who in the past, J-Mac, and at points throughout this year has just felt so dynamic, such a win condition for his team. You think about a couple of the Worlds runs that Paul went on and how important he was to those teams, how important he is to this Titans team. It's been a lot of Vulcan recently for Paul.
A lot of it.
And to have a player that is as confident as Paul at all times, certainly a boon to the Titans' cause.
And it's something that whenever we're talking with the Titans kind of about their mid laner, you know, words that come up and kind of, you know, nicknames towards him is, you know, the silent killer, the silent carry more than anything. Because it's not like in the early game, Paul is trying to take these massive 1v1 dives under the tier 1 to try and grab first blood. He's not making these extremely sneaky plays in the early or the mid game. It's really farming his way up, getting to the late game, staying alive more than anything. I mean, you know, we talk about, you know, whenever we bring up the SCC, we think of players like Erupt Crimson who go multiple weeks with either 1 or no deaths throughout entireties of sets. Paul was doing the same thing. If I transition back to, I believe it was the Phase 3 playoffs, Paul had only died a total of like 6 to 8 times over the entire course of that weekend. Had like a 44 KDA or something like that. Absolutely insane how safe this player is, but also just a mechanically gifted and amazing player at that. One of the best ones in the world. Always in the talks for actual best player to have ever touched the game. His name comes up there, being a two-time back-to-back. Sure, you think of players like Adapting and Yaman, but with the way that the game has shifted so much in the last few years, Paul always keeps his name in that conversation.
Man, and I can't wait for. God, I get so jazzed up about Worlds being around the corner. Thing about Paul, big moment where, barring a ridiculous upset happening during qualifiers, you assume the Titans will make it to the world stage. I'm thinking Paul, the brightest of lights, the biggest of stages that we've had in years for the SPL, and the team needs him. That's where Paul really thrives. Can't wait to see what the Titans are able to get done there. But got a big stage as far as Phase 3 of the SPL goes, going up against the Camelot Kings here today, because the Kings, right alongside the Titans, have been maybe the most consistent team throughout the year this year. I mean, all of the phases feeling like one of the strongest teams in the SPL, runner-up from the Phase 2, from SMITE Summer Masters. And a lot of that, of course, with big man Tings out of the mid lane. But Variety, I think, a bit of an unsung hero for this team. Throughout his career, Variety has been one of the best solo laners to ever do it. And in a meta right now where the solo lane picks feel a bit more flexible, Variety's got to play like his namesake. He's got to play a variety of picks, and he's got to play a variety of play styles.
And he has been doing that. I mean, Guan Yu, Cerberus, RDO tier, kind of four of the more recent gods that he's been able to pull up into the god pool. One of the few who is still willing to even play the Cerberus. I mean, when you talk with a lot of supports or a lot of solo laners, not many of them are singing the praises of gods like Cerberus. He's kind of been a little bit on the lower tier, but with how much sustain is coming back into the meta, with the fact that RDO is kind of making her way back in, Horus is such a popular pick as well. Wouldn't be surprised if we see more and more of this Cerberus. He has good lane pressure. He's able to really box up even against some of these other warriors with his prot shred through. But more than anything, Variety is just a guy who wants to fight. He's just a guy who wants to do his own thing. Stubborn is a word that's often described as him by his teammates and by other players in the league. If Variety puts his mind on, I want to play X pick, he's going to play it unless the other team plays it or bans it away from him. And that's just kind of the mentality that Variety has had for his team. But it's worked out, because when you have a player who is so gung-ho in his way and knowing exactly what he wants to do and how he wants to perform and play for his team, it often allows your team to kind of build around that, and the Camelot Kings have been able to do that.
But I would argue, and you're absolutely correct there, I'd argue that's the type of mindset I want my solo laner to have. When you think about what you need to do to be a solo laner, you kind of got to be a brute. You kind of got to be hard-headed and force fights to happen, and Variety one of the best in the league at getting it done. Variety and Paul, a matchup for the ages. Two players that have had long, successful careers, hoping to get one more win here in Phase 3 of the SPL. Variety and Paul standing by for a pregame interview.
This week I thought we played well. I thought we bounced back after a pretty tough 2-0 by the Dragons. And they kind of like humbled us a little bit and kind of just outplayed us and showed us like how to play the meta really. But yeah, we came back 2-0 the Scarabs, and then we beat Warriors, who also beat the Dragons, so yeah, we're feeling pretty good.
We played Velks, and we also played the Dragons. We went 1-1. It's not the best, but it could be worse. So I don't know. I'd say it's like a mediocre performance. Plus, when we played the Dragons, it wasn't really that close. So I don't know. Maybe on the worst side.
Going into next week, I think we just want to pick up a few gods which have been played this week. I think we just want to keep developing our own meta, and I think right now we're just kind of struggling on what to prioritize around the map with the addition of the Scepter and stuff like that. So I think we're just going to keep focusing on what we want to do and how we want to play the game.
Right now we're kind of just it's a giant, it's a clown fiesta, man. We don't know what we're picking, bro. Like it got a little bit better, but we're still I don't know. We're not cohesive as one unit, you know. I don't know, we're just kind of messing around. So hopefully in the next week we'll be a little bit better together, picking comps and, strategizing and stuff like that.
The Titans this phase, I think they're kind of off to a rocky start. Similar to Summer Split, they've kind of been playing some janky stuff. I think they were playing mage ADCs and stuff like that. They had played Nox ADC. But I think finally they've come around to just playing back to normal, and I think when they do that, that's when Titans are the best, and that's when they're more lethal. But honestly, it just depends on what Titan shows up. It could be the ones playing set mode with Nox ADC, or it could be the ones playing a normal ADC with a Paul and a good god.
Kings, I think they lost one set so far. They're 2-1, something like that. I'm not 100% sure about that. So they're one of the better teams. I don't think they're the best team, but they're a strong opponent, so it'll be a tough matchup.
I'd consider this matchup against Titans easier than it used to be. I think the start of the year and like maybe in a bit in summer we kind of struggled a little bit against Titans, but I think recently we've kind of been getting the upper edge on them. But also, like I said before, it just depends on which Titan shows up. It could be the Troll Titans or the Tryhard Titans who play really solid game, play the late game really well. They have really good carries, really good picks. It just depends on which Titan shows up.
I'm not sure yet. It depends on how much we scrim this week and how good the scrims are, because right now we're like kind of So, I mean, practice goes well this week, then we'll go in strong. But if not, then we'll probably be a little shaky, so we'll see.
You know, that mindset from Paul feels like it's been prevalent throughout the entire year, but the good news for the Titans, J-Mac, is that I don't think that's anything that's ever really worried this Titans team, right? I think they realize, like, all right, look, we're playing a bit janky, we're picking some weird stuff, we're seeing what may or may not work. And then as Variety said in that interview, the Titans always find their way back to the picks, the meta picks, and that's when they play their best. So you'd love to string some wins together, especially Titans fans wanting this team to kind of get going here in Phase 3. I think ultimately concern level is still relatively low for the squad.
Yeah, I think Variety may have kind of put it best at the end there. Are we going to get the try-hard Titans, or are we going to get the Troll Titans? And Troll might be sometimes a bit of a harsher word. Sometimes you look at the composition and go, yeah, that seems a little out of pocket there, you know. But to the Titans, it's composition and playstyle that typically works out for them. At one point, they're running triple assassin. They're running assassin ADC, assassin mid, and then assassin in the jungle. And that was working out. But then the problem is that when you run these kinds of oddball picks, it's similar to how what the Dragons were doing when they were doing their role swap, is teams eventually start to catch on to that. And how many times can you get away with a composition with that? How many times can you get away with picks like that before the rest of the league catches on and finds a way to counter out that? Didn't take long for teams to realize how to counter against the Dragons and be able to deal with that, namely taking away crucial picks from Paul like Set, taking Susano away from layers more than anything. So now that teams have started to understand that, and we always like to use the word innovative when it comes to it. And I think that both these teams are innovative in their own ways, where the Titans go for things that no other team is going to do. No other teams out there are running triple assassins with a single Guardian as their only pick and then a Warrior solo. But the Kings are also innovative in their own way, because they're thinking of different they're theory crafters, especially when you have players like Genetics and Captain Twig on that team. They're figuring out what is the best way to really break the current meta, and then once people have figured out how to break our meta that we've developed around that, how can we then fight against it? So the Kings are trying to play a step ahead, always in that regard, where the Tartarus Titans are playing kind of in a feels of the moment style of play.
That's right. The Titans have added some gods to the meta. I think Robin really comes to mind. Sot forced Robin into the meta, and it changed the way we looked at solo lane for a few weeks there. And also, as a total side note, love the new Titans jerseys.
They're really nice.
Skulls did a fantastic job. I love the shoulder work on those jerseys there. Very menacing. From
Shop.smiteproleague.com.
That's right, shop.smiteproleague.com for past, present, or future fans of the Tartarus Titans. A great place to start. And Guan Yu, a great place for the Titans to start their draft here. That's consistent, if nothing else, right? I mean, Guan Yu, you know what you're getting there. A little sustain. Synergizes well with the builds that the solo laners are opting for nowadays, and provides you a little CC immunity and the ability to stay aggressive. And, you know, when Sot's pick is well, I assume this will be a Guan Yu for Sot. Because sometimes it's Sot that is the one who kind of goes off the rails with his picks. You know, you're getting the Assassin, solo, whatever. So a good indicator early on that the Titans have a more clean composition being built here for Game 1.
Yeah, it seems that they're trying to kind of rein things back together, understand, okay, this is the meta and this is why it's the meta. Guan Yu, we know that this is a meta pick because of how well he uses the Fabulous Hoops, especially if you get that item a little bit earlier on, allows you to really get into these team fights, provide those extra shields to your team, have that constant battle healing where typically, after you get your hoops, you're going for as quickly as you can to 40% CDR into his build so you can max out how often you're being able to spam that heal during fights, how often you're going to be getting that cavalry charge back up. It's just a solid safe pick. Doesn't really give your hand away over to anything, but does put you at risk if you start building too much sustain into your kit. It makes you very susceptible to anti-heal. Amusin Cobb is a great answer to that because of the prot shred that he has on Stinger, but also just because of how easy it is to apply anti-heal with a god like AMC.
All right, so look, I have loved, and I actually agree with a lot of what Hurrywin was talking about with Atlas and the styles of builds that you can build on that pick, and I love the Atlas pick nowadays, and it's transformed how some players are able to play support. Khepri is about as tried and true as it gets, so I think Genetics and Aurora both get a pretty solid pick for themselves out of support. Hell is, like, if I saw Hell locked in right now and I knew it was going mid, I would probably assume it's Paul. I'm trying to, maybe BMT.
I'd put probably Shinto over anybody else.
Shinto, yeah, I get, okay, fair, Shinto. At any rate, Paul and Hell synergize pretty well in my mind, but how about this? Odin, J-Mac, for only the second time this phase.
Odin, a good matchup into all three of these picks, can trap them all inside the cage, will force a Phantom Shell out very early. Would not doubt if this Odin ends up getting that relic out as a first relic from either the Atlas, or if not from the Atlas as a first relic, definitely it's got to be a second relic for him. Though we could potentially even see Paul maybe try and flex into a shell as his second relic early on to try and deal with it. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw two of them more than anything to try and fight. And that's really what Odin provides, is just that area of denial, catch a couple of people off guard, force out a relic, just to kind of be a relic bait more than anything else. In lane, he's going to do okay against Guan Yu, although the only way to stop the Tal Assault is to use one of his primary wave clears with that Gungnir Spear, so it's going to take him a little bit of a struggle. Once he gets Bird Bomb and a couple levels into that, at least as that combo levels up, he should be fine into the solo lane, but might be a while if this Odin is going over solo for Variety before we actually see any kind of rotations from him to get to these fights.
Yeah, look, I love Odin. It's such a dynamic style of pick, and even with a Phantom Shell, it always feels like just that momentary hesitation that is sometimes forced. Even if the Phantom Shell comes out right away, that there's sort of that half second of pause where you gotta consider it, and it just adds disruption into the team fights. You're hoping the team is close by with one another. And so I think Odin, if it ends up being for Variety, a really nice look here for the Kings. Have to keep in mind that Hell Cleanse later on in the draft as well. Daji would have been a fantastic pick for the Tartarus Titans. Maybe not so much given that Hell Cleanse for the Camelot Kings, but a very strong look for Layers. On the flip side, Erlang Shen and Freya both banned away, and then the Awilix follows the Daji. So some jungle bans make their way towards Layers. And then Kernanos continues a trend here, J-Mac. With AMC, Kern, you get double physical damage and a little magical damage with Khepri. But presuming jungle still needed for the Kings, could be a lot of physical damage unless they grab some magical in the jungle.
With the AMC and the Cernanos, one with the Stinger from AMC giving the Prot Shred on Ultimate, with Cernanos having it in that change of seasons stance on his first ability. If he's in the Autumn stance, has a little bit of Prot Shred in that regard. But I think you're maybe right to show a little concern that there is a lack of magical damage. Something like Sovereignty can be picked up very early for the Atlas, at least by Aurora on the Titans, to deal with a lot of that. And so I was thinking instead, possibly this Odin could be flexing over to the jungle. Now that the Geb has already been taken away, that kind of shreds that entirely. Hunbats is going to instead be the final pickup there. So the Kings have a lot of AoE denial. They have a lot of area that you don't want to go into between the cage, the Fear No Evil, kind of Venn diagram. That one, anybody who does get caught in is probably not going to be having a fun time. Cernos with his Wild Hunt as well. But because of the lack of inherent physical shred outside of just the AMC and Cernos having to be in a very specific stance to get that there, the Tartarus Titans can build physical defense. Paul could honestly, and we haven't seen this build in a while, and so I want to go back and highlight an old build that came around at the end of Season 8, which was the Book of the Dead kind of library style of build. You get a Breastplate of Valor, you get a Book of Thoth, and then you build Book of the Dead after. You have a massive shield, you have some decent physical defense, and you just have, once you actually do, somehow, if you can get this hell under 50, 40% HP, all of a sudden here's a 40% health shield that's coming back right there. So I think the Titans have a lot of answers to this composition for the Kings. I think that now drafting this Hoyu and the Thor, two gods that can get out of the cage, makes the team fight a little bit easier now for the Titans, or makes even their engage a little bit better with this Thor. I'm still just worried about the amount of healing that they've invested into themselves with the Guan, with the Hell. And for the Kings, they're now going to have to invest in so much extra anti-heal. Curse Dong, the Odin Cage is going to come through, Brawler's Beat Stick. But there's no Divine Ruin applicator, and Khepri is not the worst, but definitely not the best god to try and apply that item.
If I see a Divine Ruin Khepri,
it could happen.
It could. I'm going to lose it, though, if that's what we end up seeing. I actually really like both of the jungle picks we get here in this game for Layers and Captain Twig, respectively. I think Twig playmaking style, but also setup, right? Twig doesn't love being considered a facilitator-style jungler only, right? Likes being able to do that, but also likes being able to carry sometimes. I think Hunbat's a nice middle ground between the two of those. Thor, of course, very strong for layers. Why Thor, do you think, instead of something like Ratatoskr? We've seen a lot of Rat into the meta. Do you think it's just sort of player preference at this point?
I think it's a little bit of player preference. Could be that because Thor is getting that big buff coming into the next patch, maybe getting a little bit of extra practice on this god. Just having that semi-global ability to find an AoE stun, especially against a composition like this that has 0 CC immunity actually in the entirety of all 5 of their kits. There's not a single ultimate or ability that gives the beads. Means that a single stun from Thor, a single cavalry charge from Guan Yu is going to get beads and sets up so easily for this team. So I think for the Tartarus Titans, if they can play around the beads that Layers is able to grab, they're going to be able to get a lot of pressure out there. But that's going to be ready for game number 1 between the Tartarus Titans and the Camelot Kings. Who's going to take it home? We'll throw it to Dave, who's ran himself over, and Hurrywin joining on the cast.
That was not a run. That was a leisurely stroll that I took over to this cast, J-Mac. And it is Dave. It is Hurrywin. Oh, my goodness. Joins me on the cast for game 1 between the Titans and the Kings. And Hurry, I'm happy we could convince you to join me here on the cast for the Titans versus the Camelot Kings. A great matchup, and I think a lot to take away from the picks and bans. Oh, you got Doug's picture too. He's our observer, but we got you on Doug's status here as well. And Hurrywin, I think a lot to take away from the picks and bans going into game number 1 here. Plenty to look at. Does anything really jump out at you, though, immediately, given the drafts of both of these teams?
No, something that's really cool, Dulce, and I'm glad you brought that up, is that we're going back to the Titans style that we saw them dominating on. We see them going back to the Hell. Now, I don't know if Hell's the strongest in this particular game, but we will find out. That's what I will say. We will find out. They're going to back to their roots, playing a sort of healing composition that they've kind of really dominated on recently, so I like to see that. But they have the Odin on the other side too, so there's definitely a lot of interesting things that could be happening this game.
Excited about what we get to see from the Odin. And look at the the shell for Aurora. It's an early pickup there. That likely turns into a Phantom Shell at some point. Forces that out when the cage drops down from Variety. The big question though on the desk was around physical damage, overwhelming from the Camelot Kings. Khepri not going to do that much. And with that, as a jump forced out by Cyclone Spin, Aurora
He will hit 2.
just going to get whittled down here, so he'll be okay. Anti-heal application. Of course, you get Brawler's Beat Stick on a few of these picks here. Do you think the ability to limit the healing is there from the Camelot Kings without a really great Divine Ruin applicator in their draft?
Yeah, we'll see Ankh, we'll see Brawlers from Captain Twig down the line. We have the Odin Cage, and we probably will see maybe a little bit of Control the Healing build as well. Perhaps a Toxic Blade even comes out versus a team composition like this. Now, I'm glad you mentioned the heavy physical damage, because we are going to be seeing Xyz, maybe even on both Hunters. Both Hunters do have Pen in their kits available, AMC with the Alt Kernos with his his first ability. So they do have the Pen there. Cyclone in trouble.
Should be okay, though. My goodness, do you expect this level of pressure, though? I mean, it's what? Netriate on Kern, Genetics on Khepri. Has often been relegated to, like, defensive-style support. So is it surprising to you that you're already seeing Cyclone Spin heavily on the back foot?
No, I think it's to be expected here. We see the Kernos is just a high-pressure early pick. The Hou-Yi, maybe not so much. Hou-Yi definitely good at securing buffs. He's good at farming, but when it comes to this pre-5, he's not necessarily super strong, so I'm not too surprised to see them getting pushed back here. No surprise at all. I think it's going to be a bit of a farm fest here in mid as well. We got a Hell versus AMC and 2 players that love farming too, so we'll probably won't see too much action there this game. No surprise at all from either of these 2 players. We see them positioning now for a blue buff here. Dolson, a blue buff invade. Titans do love their blue buff side of the map.
They sure do. And I wonder if Twig will be close enough and strong enough to push back, but Variety whittled down a little bit. Stun connects onto SOT. Double tap from Layers, no good onto Variety. Blue buff still stands, and Variety definitely the lowest as far as health goes. The Kings don't want to give this one up quietly.
Gotta play to secure here.
That's right, looking for it. Variety sends out the stun, gets double tapped again though. Sada's chunked down a mountain of damage. Captain Twig reinitiates Variety. Is he gonna bird bomb? He is! Looking for the damage, and they've got it, and it's first blood to the Camelot Kings. That was a war of attrition, a long, drawn-out fight, and the blue buff still stands. So empty-handed are the Titans, and early first blood to the Camelot Kings.
And you hate to see that for the Titans, Dolson. They're the ones who are aggressing on that blue buff. They're the ones who felt strong. Ultimately, they're going to be the ones getting first blood and falling behind. You know, they will still have this Guan Yu late game, but definitely not a great look here on the solo side of the map for the Titans. Giving Harry or Variety a lead is never something that I really like to do.
No, not on the Odin, that's for sure. You know, when Variety is able to kind of shut off the cape a little bit, get aggressive, and he's feeling himself. It's a great look. Netroid's still at level 4, but again, Cyclone Spin shoved back. I mean, at level 5, if Netroid gets a good wave clear and it hits level 5, might be an opportunity for a kill over onto Cyclone Spin. Now, the game is going to change for both of these junglers at level 5. Layers barely finishes off that speed buff, but between a Fear No Evil and what will soon be an Anvil of Dawn, clearly you expect the junglers to get a bit more active. And I asked J-Mac on the desk a bit what he thought. We were watching the SEC a bit today. We saw Ratatosker pretty highly prioritized. Why do you think the Thor here for Layers? What makes Thor the right pick?
Thor is definitely a comfort pick for Layers.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of high on seeing the changes, potentially getting Thor getting buffed in the future. And we've seen him go to this pick time and time again. I know this team was struggling for an identity, so a lot of these guys are going back to their comfort picks. You can kind of see it across the board
I guess across,
with all of their selections. So I think that's just Layers' slot in that puzzle that they've been trying to figure out, where he's going to his comfort pick, and the Thor definitely makes sense for him. I've seen him play it lots of times. We do see an invade potentially on the duo side of the map here. No surprise with all that pressure.
And it is Genetics and Netroid unable to drop the purple buff. Roar sends the ultimate flying and ends up dropping the purple buff for his ADC and Cyclone Spin. So level 5 hit right around the same amount of time. Wondered if with wave pressure, Netroid and Genetics might hit it just like slightly sooner. And so Netroid will have to still work a little bit extra hard to grab that kill onto Cyclone Spin. But you mentioned Farm Fest tends to be the way things have gone here, but the slight bit of pressure favoring the Camelot Kings. Believe Scepter, Intra-Scepter control has been there for the Camelot Kings as well. And so often you see a step up. You expect to see a jungler right around the corner, but no, both junglers hovering over towards the right side of the map. Imagine over in the mid lane, you mentioned probably a Farm Fest there. Makes some sense. You got stacking for Paul with the Warlock staff, and then Transcendence for Big Man Tings to get online with a bit of farming as well. And on the desk, we sort of talked briefly about how Paul in the past, wondered if Twig might go in. No, he won't. In the past, Paul has really liked, you know, kind of stacking item, Breastplate of Valor, Book of Thoth, Book of the Dead, something like that. Do you think there's room for a Breastplate of Valor in the build for Paul here, given the physical damage that the Kings are bringing?
Oh, he's going Breastplate, Dave. He's absolutely going Breastplate here. He's in a 4 Fizz and a Kepri. If he doesn't go Breastplate this game, I expect that he's never building it ever again. So this is the perfect Breastplate game. There you go.
All right.
He starts to pick it up. No surprise. And glad to see it, too, especially in this game. I do want to say the Kings did get off to a good start here, and I am glad for their sake, because they need to get off to a good start with such a heavy physical composition that they got to deal with. So I'm glad they got ahead. We will be seeing the Xyz later, so that'll help them transition into the late game, but ultimately they do need this lead.
Cage around Sot. Fear No Evil from Captain Twig. Oh, but nicely countered out by the cavalry charge, and a stun from Sot as well. Wow, a kill does not roll through. Played about as great as it could have been by SOT in fighting. Now on the left side, a little bit of lockdown finds its way to Netroid, shrugged off by the beads. And with all of that scrapping, no kills. So still just the first blood for Captain Twig a bit earlier on. I look back to the way Sot played that. That's a tense moment. You got the cage. You got to avoid as much as you can. And I think Sot played it about as perfectly as he could.
Yeah, well-timed ultimate, ultimately getting out of a sticky situation. He really needs to be surviving, especially falling behind early against the Titans.
Yeah.
Ultimately here, I think the Titans are going to be happy with any close trade. They are going to be able to itemize very well versus the Kings as the game progresses on here. They've got the sustain comp. They're okay taking trades across the map as long as they're not falling too far behind, which they're not. I think things are looking pretty up for them.
All right, Layers at level 7. Haven't seen the big Anvil of Dawn just yet. Goes Beads first, and it's Blink for Captain Twig. So, of course, you got Initiation, but it's going to come in different styles between both these junglers. More pressure on a blue buff, this time dropped by the Camelot Kings, but Sot, 3/4 of the way to the cavalry charge. He is simply buying time and gets it, and right on time the cavalry charge on cooldown comes out. I don't know if Variety has the legs, does not. And Sot playing with fire a little bit. will not drop the blue, so at least Variety at some point goes back, picks up that blue buff. But an early rotation out from Big Man Tings, feeling like there's a bit of space to roam around early on this AMC, and have not seen really pressure from either of these junglers Hurrywind placed on the mid lane.
And that rotation makes a lot of sense for Big Man Tings. They know that Sot does not have beads yet available, and they probably thought his ult was down, and I think it just came up right at the right time.
Yep.
We unfortunately saw Variety miss his stun there on the Odin, which I think would have been the great setup that we were looking for that AMC ultimate. Unfortunately dropped the ball there a little bit. I think that probably was a good call out to bring Big Man over. Maybe shut Sot down, punish him for forcing his ult out earlier. Did not end up getting the kill, which of course Sot now being a little bit of an escape artist this game, happy to get out again. He is trying to get to that late game here as that Guan Yu, and I'm sure he's happy to survive again.
And now, you know, I think when we talk so much about AMC and the rotation out, so much of the conversation around AMC is often, you know, punishable, right? I mean, super immobile, but you have the beads, that helps you out a little bit. You know, with layers, with this Thor, still have the beads on Big Man Tings, haven't seen those dropped off yet this game. Is mid maybe where you'd put your eyes here if you're layers? Try to slow down Big Man Tings, force a set of beads here and there. Maybe not, as Sot will poke out some damage. And Genetics has actually gone in here. I thought we might disengage, but no, the Tartarus Titans hope to fight. Anvil of Dawn will go up. You got to immediately crash down. Oh, it's a double stun out of nowhere from layers, but the Fear No Evil, it's fantastic. And a double stun on the back end by the Camelot Kings as well, but the damage, the healing, it's overwhelming from the Titans, and the chase down continues. There's your immobility, and there's your damage from the Titans. A 2-kill swing, and it's all a big chase out onto the Camelot Kings, who maybe were just a bit overextended.
And they needed that. The Titans needed that. They want those scrappy fights in the jungle. They want to use that healing. They want to take long and extended fights. They want to see the team overextend in their jungle because they do have the Thor ult. They do have the Atlas ult. So ultimately, they end up punishing the Kings for overextending there onto their side of the map, perhaps looking for a Scorpion steal. A little overzealous. Titans are a team that are very good at not letting you step past where you're allowed to step, and they punish them great there. They have that sustain. They have the Guan heals. They have the Guan ult for the chase down. They have the Thor ult for the chase down, and they ultimately kill them all and get the objective.
Netroid uses the Wild Hunt. As Captain Twig was hovering close by. No fear, no evil, but hey, we'll take a purple buff invade right when that camp comes back up. So Cyclone's been largely left alone, so has Netroid. That's why you pick something like a Thor. You talked about Ratatoskr, a potential option as well, but to suddenly turn the tides, Big Man Tings, no beads, and shouldn't be much of a chance to live. Aurora's going to tank up this tower plenty. Paul transforms, and we were talking earlier about, do you try to punish the AMC?
There you go.
Fantastic opportunity there with the beads down. Yeah, that should be a coach, right?
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So AMC is a character that is historically a little bit unsafe. A lot of times in mid, you are having a bit of a network of hives set up, and people do put points in that hive, typically pretty early on as the AMC, and that does kind of create a little bit of a net of a safety. Unfortunately, not enough against characters like Guan Yu, against characters like Atlas that can easily displace him. You see that there again. Them looking to play mid off his beats, cooldown being down, now aggressing on this mid-tier one here with their sustain comp. Sot coming behind.
He is, but flexible enough, slippery enough maybe, as Captain Twig, who will leap away. Always got to be careful when the Fear No Evil is ready to go. It's still awkward for the Camelot Kings. Got this Trebuchet whittling down some damage. You'd fall a bit more gold behind. It's already a decent little lead early on for the Tartarus Titans with what we've talked about kind of building up around the corner here, the ability to itemize into some of what the Camelot Kings are building. And so a good start for the Titans. So at the 12-minute mark, you're starting to look forward to the next 15 or so minutes of this game. Do you think the Titans are in a better position given their composition, or maybe we'll hold that thought until after the Camelot Kings maybe finish off this Gold Fury? Paul and Cyclone spin will not steal it away, and it is a Gold Fury right back to the Kings. And so call the game even at 12 minutes as far as golden experience. Who do you think's happier with their position at the 13-minute mark?
I think the Titans are happier ultimately just because they've got that Hell late game, they've got the Guan late game, they've got a better damage split unfortunately, they've just got a bit more magic damage compared to the Kings here in the situation. So the Kings comp is still going to be good with that double hunter composition at burning down objectives, as you just saw. So if they do find windows, they can still secure objectives. As far as team fights are concerned, though, I think the Titans are going to be in a commanding position here if they are able to set up 2 objectives on time. And now that's going to be a lot easier now that they've kind of escaped this early game, now that they've punished this AMC.
Yep.
I think that if they can kind of get the ball rolling a bit more here, you'll probably look for an early rotation from Cyclone Spin towards something like this Pyromancer respawn, potentially an early Fire Giant. And if they can do that and set up properly, I think the Titans are probably the ones you should be looking to be in the lead here.
That's right. Cyclone Spin finishes up the kin size. Over on the flip side, we wondered how many brawlers we'd see. Definitely one for Captain Twig. Big Man Tings picks up one as well. And then Netrioid into the Executioner. Aurora abducted, though. Good wall stun by Layers. That's got to connect every time just to give Aurora an easier avenue out. Hits perfectly. And so often when we talk about Thor, right, it is momentum and sort of mood and whether those skill shots are hitting. And Layers is hitting it all. That Scarab's Blessing could not have waited a moment longer. Forced out. Whoa! Oh, nearly! That would have been unbelievable by Aurora.
You know he's looking for that every time.
Yeah, every single time I'm letting that one go. What else are you possibly going to use that for if not a kill on a Captain Twig? But like when you talk about a jungler entering the flow state, right? You close your eyes, you meditate a bit. Layers is hitting double stuns, double taps. This is when Thor is at his most threatening, when the player's connecting with just about everything he's throwing out there, and it just adds such an extra level of dynamic into the game.
Thor's so mechanically intensive, Dave. He definitely is a very tough character. That's why it does make sense as a comfort pick for Layers, because I know he's piloted this character a lot. He's been very accurate this game with the walls, with the hammers, and that's what you need out of your Thor player when they go to that pick, especially in these big SPL sets. So he's looked on point. I think ultimately as we get to this late game, we're going to need to see big ults. Cyclone may be in trouble.
He is in trouble, especially if Captain Twig, I was going to say, can wait out the beads. Watch out. Layers up. At least going to get one stun. No, I lied. Beads used perfectly by Layers. Walls on a Netrioid. And the Aegis used, delays the inevitable. Paul on a killing spree. The Titans have just been so good at reinitiating. And here's your reinitiation. It's Cyclone Spin back in, but it's Aurora shutting the door in Twig's face. The Titans on a run here. The Kings, after first blood, have gone down 5 in a row. And the Titans right on it here with their answer back. Just a bit too aggressive maybe there from Twig and Netrioid.
Yeah, they've got first rotation, but unfortunately, good thing we were talking about the Thor. You see why that pick can be so deadly. Aurora actually may be in a little bit of trouble here, being caged off by the Odin, falling very low, will die to Big Man Ting.
That'll happen.
That will happen. We've all been there if you've ever played sport before. He is very tanky with those 2 physical defense items, but not tanky enough to survive a cage, not tanky enough to survive.
Yeah, do you feel that personally as a support
yeah,
player,
I feel
that
it.
moment
And
just now?
I do feel it. I do feel a little bit of pain on his behalf. Like, really a cage just for Aurora?
Have you felt your bias change since role
absolutely.
changing?
Absolutely.
You're full on support bias now.
Yeah,
Fair
carries are too scared.
You get it. You get all the action. As the action around the Pyromancer, still confirmed by the Tartarus Titans. Variety, though, attempting the steal. Puts himself in a very awkward spot. Netrioid has ult.
The wall.
But of course, Layers hits a double stun. Why wouldn't he? Oh, how about this call? Right back to the Fire Giant go the Camelot Kings. This is a game-changing fight, a game-changing moment. It's low and it's confirmed by the Camelot Kings. All the disruption into Sop, but the Anvil of Dawn crashes down onto 2. Layers takes the hammer out, and the call pays off. You cannot out-objective the Camelot Kings, and what in the world? Double Hunter pays off. Fire Giant on all 5. You might lose Big Man Tings, but no, you keep the buff on everyone. And how about that call, hurry win from the Camelot Kings?
And if you give them an inch, they will take a mile with this composition. A little bit lazy on this objective play here by the Titans, and the Kings will take advantage of that. Wow. They will burn that Fire Giant in all but, I don't know, 5 seconds, even with the Thor out on the table. No problem for them. They're also going to choose to split the map here with Netrioid. I think this is a good call. He does need the farm right now. It is still relatively early, even though they have picked up a Fire Giant. Now the Kings under fire here in this Tier 1 tower. Seeing if they can just kind of grab it and leave as the Titans, and they will, so no problem on that. Netrioid splitting the map, Twig looking to take away some back camp farm here. This is really great macro play. This is what the Kings do well. No surprise to see them going for this kind of play here. The Gold Fury will, unfortunately,
At
for
least,
the
right?
Titans, or for the Kings, go the way of the Titans. And I think that will be a really big win for them here, especially after losing that early Fire Giant. Now, this Fire Giant, Dave, is probably going to be more of a tower-getting Fire Giant. They're going to use it to kind of cement their lead here. They haven't had the best time in team fights. They only have 2 kills so far. So it's for me, they just want to kind of get their lead established here, finish some more of their items, get their Xyz, get their pen. That way they can actually start to kill these really tanky physical targets.
Now we saw Shadow Steel for Panda Cat in our last set. Picked up by Netrioid here. In your mind, is that just one extra layer of anti-heal added in for the Camelot Kings? You just, you know, a little bit of crit, sure, but slowing down what the Titans are going for more than anything else?
I think this item has sort of found its way up in the last
Yeah.
week or so.
Yeah.
Maybe some of us out there haven't really read the stats on it properly. Maybe they found something out that we didn't. I'm seeing it even picked up in games when there's not a lot of healing on the table. So
Right.
in this game, it makes perfect sense, right? If they already think the item's good, there's so much healing, it makes sense to go towards that.
Makes sense to pick it up. Watch out for layers, though. Hits the wall into Variety. Not selling out for the tier 1 tower. I mean, another auto attack or two. And you're gone! But what a miraculous Fear No Evil from Captain Twig. It's on to 3. The wall for follow-up. The cage, rather, from Variety. Looks great, but the Tartarus Titans able to backpedal. And this is where the Anvil of Dawn can come out of nowhere. And we'll have to see what Layers chooses to do with it. Variety being chased. Layers in the middle of the fight. A Scarab's Blessing slows down the re-engage. And a double root on the back end forces Cyclone Spin up and over. The tug of war, it is unbelievable. The Camelot Kings will re-engage, but remember, there's that healing from the Titans that'll keep them healthier under this tier 2 tower. Aurora's got ultimate. Paul's got the stance shift, but that is it. Nobody else with the big swing. And it's still Hurry Wind as the Kings putting up some aggressive positioning here beneath the tier 2.
Yeah, I love this back and forth gameplay. That TP is going to cement the end of that engagement there. No surprise to see a full health player coming back in, dissuading that. Really good fight back by the Kings. They're the team without Fire Giant. You see they kind of play that chase down. They play their sustain. They play the re-engage very well. Luckily enough, they don't lose anyone, so they don't even lose a tier 2 tower outside of the one that Netroid split on the other side of the map earlier. So ultimately, a big win for the Titans there. The Kings aren't going to get too much off of this Fire Giant. And if they aren't able to burn this next Fire Giant the way they did the previous one without much contention, I do think they could be in a little bit of trouble here.
That's true.
If the Titans can set up properly on time for this next Fire Giant, spawning in about a minute here, Dave.
That's right. Yeah, itemization has started to catch up a little bit. Good damage is suddenly going to flow through from Big Man Tings, though. Gets the tier 2 Titan's Bane. Love that item. Could burst down, you know, Sot or Roar, some of these healthier targets. And yeah, the conversation around... Is that Sot who threw up the bolts global?
Of course it is.
There's some
gotta be him.
There's some humor somewhere in there.
Yeah, no, he's a funny guy.
I appreciate it. But Aurora's gone Divine Ruin anyway, but bit tankier on the first part of that build, and so it's allowed Sot to play a certain way on that Guan Yu, tanky enough for Aurora. Going into this next FG, is that build sort of what you'd expect from Aurora? Are you happy with the state of this Atlas going into the Fire Giant fight?
Yeah, and the boon, too, I think kind of lends itself to the idea that they're going to be playing sustain wars here whenever they can possible. It's going to give them a lot of extra health on top of the healing his team already has. Now, I will mention the Kings are the ones who took the dominant position here on this Fire Giant with deep boards available. Variety getting his jump forced out. Probably not going to be too much here right off the bat. This might be a bit of a dance. We do have some sustain to deal with. So the Kings are the ones who want to force an all-in fight if possible. Catch them out. They don't want to play a heal war. They will not win that battle against this Guan Yu, against this Hell. So we're either going to see an objective burn here, potentially split from Twig and mid.
None of the shells have been upgraded to Phantom, though. 3 of them
True.
for the Tartarus Titans. And so we've been able to break those walls pretty clearly. You got 3 shells that are just begging for the Phantom upgrade, both on the carries and on Aurora as well. As Sot, you know, with the cavalry charge can kind of hang out in the cage a little bit. Layers can go up and over if need be. This is where you got to be careful. When the Kings are on full-on retreat, that's sometimes where you see just a random Thor dunk down and catch you on the back foot. Won't be this time. And it may be one of the most, I think, in a lot of esports, the Fire Giant dance, if you look at all of gaming, one of the more tense moments because you're just sort of waiting for one of the 2 teams to suddenly pull that trigger to see someone stepped just a bit too far forward. And it's really where the palms get sweaty, you know?
Yes,
it's
very
it's
much
where the
so.
It's where the money gets made, and we're so close here in this game. A couple thousand gold ahead of the Kings, but we've talked a lot about the Titans and their risk of initiation. Is ward coverage all the difference in your mind around this Fire Giant, or do you think one team really has the upper hand?
Ward coverage plays a big game. You're going to notice how they place these normal wards sort of in awkward positions and spots where you wouldn't usually find sentries. That way they don't get dewarded. That way they can get deep vision. You even see that sentry there right outside the tier 2 in mid from the Kings. No surprise that they put all these deep wards here. This is what kind of gives you the advantage at Fire Giant, just knowing exactly where the enemy team is. Titans looking to take a bit more of a defensive position here around Fire Giant. Doesn't look like they're the ones who really necessarily want to pull this Fire Giant.
How do you play around these trebuchets? Because there's one waiting for the Titans. Do you go back? Are you sending that right now just to give the King something to think about, or is it not worth the time to spend getting over there?
I'd say that's probably a good assessment, where it's probably not worth the time. If they know someone's that far away, they might rip it on the Fire Giant and take a 50-50 while you're not able to respond and your player's not around. Right. Even with the TP, sometimes it takes a little bit too long. So Titans are going to be a little bit worried about walking away too far from this Fire Giant. You see this poke ward Twig coming around the back side.
Uh-oh. There it is. It's Twig, and it's on a Cyclone Spin. We'll have to go up and over. Use the beads. But Sadi's been left alone with a roar on the front line. Variety, same could be said for him. Scarab's blessing from Genetics onto the Odin. And yet again, we saw a couple of these fights earlier on in the game where you kind of get this big swing, and then everyone takes a deep breath. But ultimate advantage heavily for the Tartarus Titans. Twig's ult gone. Genetics gone. Variety Cage gone. Tartarus Titans fighting with everything around this Fire Giant. And they do have vision, and the Kings can see what's happening. It's Fire Giant melting through, a Cyclone Spin just dealing some damage while Aurora tanks it up. Metroid steps forward. Sod has tanked up the Fire Giant. Aurora has as well. And they will all gallop away, but they're all very grouped. Root connects only onto Aurora. Stinger is there as well, but it's a double wall from Layers. Anvil of Dawn that'll flip this fight right back around whenever he crashes, unless it is disengaged. No, it's caught Metroid in Variety, but without any follow-up. The Camelot Kings remain as 5.
And the Titans want this. They want to play the sustain game. They can just keep coming back. Sok and TP in here. The Titans probably looking to pull this again. Sok maybe with a sentry too this time, so they won't have vision anymore. That is exactly going to be what happens. They've got a man advantage here, Dulcin. They are definitely looking to take this Fire Giant down, but unless they don't feel super confident. It's
the scales of the ultimate battle now, though, as well. You got the sustain battle. That's for the Titans. But remember, the Kings used their ultimates first. Those starting to come back up now, and the second wind of the fight here, the Scarab's Blessing about to be back up here, soon to have a Fear No Evil. But the Camelot Kings will take a deep breath. Gold Fury is up. You're obviously not going to trade out a Fire Giant for a Gold Fury, and the map stayed relatively even, so it's not like either team having to immediately leave, deal with fire minions, anything like that, rushing down the map.
Yeah, not a lot of map play going on, just a bit of a Fire Giant dance. I do think these Titans backliners probably want to back pretty soon here. I think they're probably both holding on to a good amount of gold. Paul also getting a little bit low on mana. We see Cyclone Spin actually reset about 5 seconds ago.
Can they burn it like this fast, though, do you think?
If you give them a window, they might.
Wow.
They do have that Bracer.
Wow, it is going. It's the Kings who start it. Fear No Evil onto 2, and the Camelot Kings, you said it perfectly earlier. You give them an inch. And the Camelot Kings, especially with this comp, you got an AMC, you got a Kernanos. I mean, it absolutely melts. And that can't have surprised the Titans, right? They have to realize that.
No, they know. They know that Fire Giant can die quickly. They're just struggling to get their backs off, as you saw. A lot of people on their team were probably looking to get backs off where they were just holding gold for a long amount of time. I think they kind of get a little bit baited by their sustain comp, get stuck on the map a little bit too long, whereas the Kings actually get a fresh reset off, come back with a new set of wards, get their wards down, get their priority around Fire Giant, and do exactly what they did the first time. And burn that Fire Giant in about 2 or 3 seconds is what it felt like to me, Dave.
Yeah, that was quick. And the Camelot Kings regain the advantage. I mean, this has been a slow burn kill game, but with a whole lot of fighting. If you told me we were 7 kills in with the amount of fighting that we've got, I wouldn't believe you, but here we are, and it puts the Kings ahead by about 5,000 gold. It's going to get worse for the Tartarus Titans as the Gold Fury will drop as well. And so a nice hefty amount of gold will flood into the coffers of the Camelot Kings, who have already been able to go back, reset just a little bit, and 2 tier 2 towers still remain. So now we get to the point in the game where we finally start talking about Phoenix defense. And at the beginning of the game, I'm sure we're wondering how the Kings' Phoenix defense is going to look because the Titans were just playing with such momentum. but the objectives have swung for the Kings. So you turn your eyes towards the Titans, their team, their composition. You think they've got a good 5 for keeping the Camelot Kings at bay?
I do think they have a lot of good tools to keep them at bay here, though the Kings do have a double ADC composition, so
Yeah,
these
right.
objectives will die quickly. And I did favor this Titans comp coming into the late game here, but it just seems this Fire Giant was just too big of an objective and that they did not have the tools for, whereas on the other side, the Kings do have an objective that can deal with that Fire Giant. So now with that Fire Giant, looking to push down left lane, they do have a Stubble Hunter composition, electing to split Captain Twig in mid. I think that's probably a good selection. They will have to worry about that Thor covering him because he does have a global, so he can rotate over to the left. They are actually collapsing mid here. They actually catch, with the cage, they catch Paul off and Aurora off here, Dave.
Variety sends his stun forward. Wow, that Phoenix gone immediately. Layers wants to go, though. Or does he? Considering genetics. Takes genetics and forces the bug to scurry away. But how about that from Captain Twig? Again, the Fear No Evil connects. And again, it's big. The Titans sent running. A couple sets of beads burnt. They're off Layers. They're off Paul. Only genetics is really low, though. And with how fast that Phoenix burnt, the Kings maybe like their chances around this Phoenix.
And I'm sure they do. They now have a little bit of an advantage here. They still have AMC ult. They still have Kepri ult. They do have Odin Cage coming back up again soon, too, so I imagine that's what their plan's going to be a little bit centered around.
Yep.
They do have Fire Giant sustain here, too, so they're not going to be losing the sustain war anymore like they were previously. They can play this slow if they need to. They don't need much time to get this Phoenix. They just need a little bit of space. Variety is looking the backline with that ultimate.
That's a lot onto Aurora. My goodness, that caught me off guard. Variety chunked down as well. That may be the last of it, though. Variety does have teleport.
Fire Giant just over a minute. They'll probably want to reset.
Yeah, fair enough. You got 30 seconds or so. Is that usually your indicator? You're like, we got maybe one more chance at this. Not worth it. Unless
you want to bait it out.
You're baiting it out. Aurora rooted in place. Twig from up and over the wall. Stinger seals the deal. And the Titans thought the same. They thought the Fire Giant siege was over. And now the game suddenly at risk. The left side Phoenix also melted through. And here come the Camelot Kings as 5 into the base of the Tartarus Titans. And on to the Titan, they will not go. One more deep breath and one more bait ultimately does not end this game unless they do it again. The wild hunt down from Netrioid, the cage through. It's on to SOT, who will cavalry charge out. Layers smacks a couple at the anvil of Dawn, but he is punched back in the jaw. And the Camelot Kings, they've roared back into this game. They are on the Titan. They have 4 kills total. And the Camelot Kings, in unbelievable game number 1, gives them the win.
And that was just incredible. I really did not think the Kings necessarily had it in them here in this this game here at the end.
Wow.
I was worried about their composition going into the late game. Ultimately, the Titans didn't come up the way maybe we'd expect with their at-home picks. I really expected them to really make a name for themselves. This is an important step for them to win. Unfortunately, falling 1-0 now, the Kings, with their namesake and with their play style, ultimately taking control of that game and getting it done. Dude.
Yeah, look, that's such a strong composition there for the Kings. And it was a really great, start to that game for the Tartarus Titans. I think they were feeling comfortable with the way the early portions of that game went. But there's just something about this Kings team and their decision-making around these objectives. Think that first Fire Giant.
So decisive.
It was what, like 17 minutes?
They know what they want, Dave.
They do.
They want that Fire Giant.
They want that Fire Giant when they've got Shoguns on their support. Right. They've got double ADC. Do you think the Stinger ended up carrying a lot of weight here? You're talking about physical protections. You think Stinger was massive for the Kings here and doing a lot of that damage?
I don't think that team comp works without Stinger.
Fair enough.
It's too important.
It had to be the Stinger. It had to be the Camelot Kings. It always was. Game number 1 to the Camelot Kings. Game number 2 against the Titans. Coming up next. A bit of a slow burn here in game number 1. The Tartarus Titans off to an early kill lead, playing effectively around their composition. The sustain war was going well, but the sudden in-your-face fight style of the Camelot Kings, and let's be honest, a double ADC with Shoguns on the support burns objectives very, very quickly. An early Fire Giant really makes the difference here in this one. And J-Mac, the objective Kings take the game number 1.
And a lot of it, especially for those kind of later Fire Giants, came off the back of Variety using these cages. So whether it be to hold a few people in and kind of get the team fight started out for the Camelot Kings, then force the Tartarus Titans to go back and resustain, or in cases like we saw where the Kings pull the Fire Giant, the Titans are a little late to get there. Variety just drops cage at the only entry point into the Fire Giant that the Titans could reasonably get to at that point. It entirely cuts that off. Captain Twig drops a Fear No Evil in the middle of the 2 people caught inside of that cage, just to guarantee that they have a CC chain to prevent a potential steal out there. And that's really how these late game fights had to play. It was off the back of Variety, off the back of Captain Twig. But because the kills, and this is the exact moment right here that I was just mentioning on there, holding out the Fire Giant to keep the 2 frontliners from making in. But the fact that we get 29 minutes into the game, this is the only 2 kills further that we're going to really be seeing out of the Kings. A lot of it comes down to the play around the Stinger. I think Hurrywin encapsulated perfectly is this composition does not work if Stinger is not on the board. If this is not an AMC, if this is not, even you throw something maybe like a Nemesis later on, this comp doesn't work because there's just not enough pen, there's just not enough pick power that comes there. That Stinger, not only does it shred protections, it does a lot of damage. So essentially when you throw that Stinger as AMC, you are telling your team, we are full committing onto this one person because we're going to do a lot of damage to that one person. And that's the way they're able to find the few picks that they had through the game was off the back of making sure that Big Man Tings, who got 3 of the kills, only not a part of one of the ones very early on. But that's how the late game damage comes through for the Kings.
Got to be a bit of a frustrating game for the Titans. I mean, Paul goes 302. Layers had a fantastic game on the Thor. Everything was connecting. The damage was there. I'm considering running that back if I'm the Titans because Layers was just feeling it. But Big Man Tings really steals the show here. 10,000 damage ahead of anyone else. Captain Twig, a great look. And we talked in Picks and Bans. Twig doesn't want to just be the facilitator guy. He wants to be able to carry some of these games, and it was a little bit of both from Twig here in game number 1. And so, I think if you're the Titans, you're probably a bit frustrated in the way that game ends because you're like, we gave up first blood, got 5 straight kills, but got out-objectived throughout the rest of game number 1, and it wasn't this big sweepy moment that took it away. The Kings just kept stealing it away from us. And so the Camelot Kings, on the flip side, that's just what they do. Game number 2, about to kick off, though. We'll see if the Titans change up their draft strategy. We'll see if the Camelot Kings stick with a bit more of the same. Because that was, we talk about the unique style of compositions that the Titans play, J-Mac. That was about as standard SMITE as the Titans get.
I think the one thing that was just lacking from the Titans composition was a little bit more punch power. When you build these double sustain style of compositions, and yes, there's a little bit of shred when it comes to the Guan Yu with its Tallow Assault. Yes, you have some damage with the Ho Yi, and Thor obviously with Layers able to pick that one. But you're just missing out on a little bit of extra damage. All of the sustain, and it gets highlighted perfectly around the Fire Giant, where the Titans are able to come back fight after fight after fight against the Kings because they can go back with Paul, everybody heals up, walk back in. The Camelot Kings have to either send someone back to base and come back in, such as Variety with a teleport, or somebody has to make their walk back. But because the Titans don't have enough damage during the team fights to really put threat to the Kings can kind of fight into the sustain comp because there's just not enough threat coming back at them instead of what they're able to output over to the Titans.
AMC, Kepri, yet again. So it's a similar start, the same start for the Kings. All right,
just a salty run back?
Could be. I asked Hurrywin about the viability of runbacks, and he thinks that's very NA style, And again, jokes aside, I'm wondering if that's what the Titans are feeling. They're thinking, guys, we actually fought really well early. We just didn't convert that into any objectives. Remember, they backpedaled from 1 Fire Giant at like the 17-minute mark, and the game was kind of over from that point on. Also worth noting, there were 3 shells picked up. I think only one of them by the end of that game became a Phantom Shell, just didn't have enough gold on either of the carries to get up there. And so at least through the first 6, J-Mac, it is the salty run back indeed. Wonder if you could consider a Thor ban here. If you're the Kings, you could I don't know if you're banning any of the ADCs. I mean, this is maybe you're banning the Hun bats if you're the Titans. Plenty of options here in the second wave.
I think maybe if Layers changes up his pick a little, that composition can work. The downside of Thor is his late game has to be pristine in order to be able to really get the maximum value out of it, as compared to God maybe like Susano, who doesn't have to be quite as perfect in it. As long as he can get a big Typhoon that he can fire from max range, be a little bit safer. He has 2 different ways of getting in or out of the team fight. 3 if you have a blink built into your relic slot there. So I think a slight change up in that regard could make this composition work for the Titans, because Thor puts out the damage, but he has to be immediately in your face. So Layers has to stick around the whole time, has to use his only form of safety in the hammer to either disengage or to get his extra DPS out there. I think if maybe that switches over to a Susano, that composition could work and actually fight back for the Titans. We will have to see at least 1 change-up, now 2, because the Hou-Yi and then the Cernanos that got banned away at the very least. So Kings are making some slight adjustments to theirs by taking the Hou-Yi away from Cyclone. Tartarus Titans, I'm really kind of pushing for Susano to maybe be the pick, but anything can kind of change up here for the Titans to slot in there.
J-Mac, what in the world? What's going on here? That was the third eye opened, and you crossed your legs and you pinched your thumb and your pointer finger and just willed it into existence.
I can my way through there.
My goodness, that's a call and a half. That's a call and a half. Susano pick for Layers is the choice, and then Ishtar for Cyclone Spin. 1 game played, 100% win rate. So Ishtar ends up being the hunter pick for Cyclone Spin after the Hou-Yi not able to be run back. Do you like, I assume you like the Susano pivot because you set up why you might like it. How about Ishtar here for Cyclone?
I think Ishtar has a lot of different possible build paths that can go to make this pick work. If you want to go the crit, that's going to be really good about taking objectives down, because when you use that shotgun blast on the first ability, you use the second incarnation of it, you get a lot of extra spread damage shot. I think it's technically called the spread shot or something like that, but I always call it the shotgun blast because that's how it feels. You get hit by the 1 main arrow, and then all the shrapnel that hits them out there adds up to an extra 40% damage that goes through, and all of those have the ability to crit as well. So you start adding in that extra crit factor, objectives start melting, or you can go for the more power pen style. That's the more traditional hunter build right now. Allows you to melt through a lot of the tanks if you want to stay in their path. Is also just a much kind of safer option, but we have been seeing some diversity in the hunter builds. We've been seeing things like the Fail not kind of pop its way back occasionally. Shadow Steel has been making its way into a couple of builds. We saw that in that last game. We saw it in the set before, picked up as well. So a lot of options to Ishtar. I think the one main thing that I like about Ishtar versus a lot of the other hunters, especially when we look back to like Medusa versus Ishtar that we had yesterday, is when Medusa uses her giant cone ult that can stun people. I had to say can because you have to be looking at the Medusa. If there's a wall or anything there, that Medusa ult is completely useless. You can only catch a certain area. Ishtar can fire that ultimate through a wall and doesn't have to have people staring at her in order to get that stun. All she has to do is hit them once, pull it back, and she can hit them again. By the way, pull it from the grave as well, and you can find multiple. Zapman found like 5 or 6 different 2 or 3 man stuns with that ultimate whenever he played it. So I think this Ishtar is a really good pick for Cyclone and just a really good team fighting hunter in general.
Yeah, it really does add different initiation styles to this Titans draft. And so that ends up being a big question. So you talked about what Susano adds for Layers. You do remove the semi-global, the Anvil of Dawn. He was hitting a lot of those. The wall's very, very dynamic. But Susano has the ability to, I mean, it's much shorter range, but initiate from a range, I suppose, with the Typhoon. On the flip side, the Kings, they only change their hunter pick. So has this got to be a mindset change in your mind from the Titans where we know exactly what we're going up against? We've got to play smarter around the objectives.
Yeah, I think the Camelot Kings can almost run the exact same style of builds and pathing that they did as the last game. Obviously, you're slotting as Cernanos for a Hou-Yi, who's going to be good up against the tanks late game. So I think for the Camelot Kings, their game plan is just about the exact same thing. Tartarus Titans, if Layers can get into the backline, get some of these big Typhoons, it can work out really well for them. But for game number 2, the Tartarus Titans have got to find their fight back. They've got to find a win to keep their chances alive. Can they do it? Or are the Camelot Kings going to make a 2-0? We'll throw it over to Dave and Hurry win one more time.
I've been here the whole time. We're right back into it. Camelot Kings and the Titans into game number 2. They go. And Hurry, when we got to talk on the desk the other day about salty run back, right? The idea you lose the game, you run it back. And I was wondering about the Titans' mindset going into this game, because that's got to feel like a game in game 1 where it kind of just gets away from you, right? You only died twice prior to the Titan siege, and so are you surprised that the Titans have gone back to similar, albeit not the same, but a similar style of composition?
I'm pleasantly surprised, Dave. I'm pleasantly surprised because I'm happy to see them get away from the Thor. I don't think Layers necessarily had a bad game. I actually think the walls are very impactful, but it was making those late game team fights really awkward that they didn't have that sort of consistency from that jungle in that 5v5 unit. And I also think the switch up to the Ishtar will be really nice too, kind of adding another team fight ultimate into the arsenal of the Titans.
Is he going to steal this?
Oh, here he goes.
Oh, I thought he was going to attempt to steal it from over the wall. I was going to be a happy boy, but no, I won't. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You never know with genetics. I mean,
you never know. Well, Aurora did steal away the purple buff, but genetics doesn't have the root or the abduct. Just slow burn. Should be fine, but will enter this laning phase a bit lower. Cyclone Spin soloed green, soloed purple, and Aurora got purple XP. That's been a start where I'm just more used to seeing now supports just soloing out the opposing purple. It has not been the standard kind of duo lane rotating through the jungle together.
Yeah, and I'm going to explain it because
Please do.
I see a lot of people confused about it.
My support mentor here.
Right.
Tell me why we're doing that.
So what this does is it lets your ADC hit too early, and then continually wave after wave, you'll see the ADC is actually a level up on the opposition, assuming the opposition doesn't do the same start. So you've seen people actually mirror it now, because it's very oppressive to play versus someone who just has an extra ability or an extra 2 abilities. So this start, supports have decided that I'm cool with being level 1 if my ADC gets to be a level ahead every wave, because that's going to net me pressure, it's going to get me Scepter. And now that that's over there, it's like considered to be a pretty important objective. Layers, interestingly enough, making an early rotation over to get the Scepter. Oh, they're not even going to give it to him. What a shame.
Yeah, but okay, but look, Aurora is the one who grabs it, right? And so it's a support bias, right? Support player. You're thrilled that Aurora didn't have to do anything.
I couldn't beg my jungler to come over there to do it if he wasn't getting it on the way out.
Really? I guess right, because you don't get the gold or experience from doing it if you're far enough away. But
it will be nice in this dual lane to have.
Sure,
so
it does feel good. Yeah, interesting. So we've seen a decent bit of that. Does the value of that fall off once you get to like level 5? Is that really like an early game?
So what it
help
does
for you, like once everyone has all the same buttons,
right?
Does it feel like it falls off a little bit and just gets you through the early game a bit better?
Well, it actually gives you some HP 5 as well.
Yeah,
so it combines with your pots to just give you a lot of sustain. You can play really aggressive in the lane. A lot of times you'd see people use it to kind of pressure out the enemy purple buff first respawn. Here they're not going to be able to do that. Genetics does still have the hog, so probably not a great option for him anyway. But a lot of times what it does is it allows you to take the pressure into that purple buff, maybe the other side camps, the castle camp as we call it. And just kind of net more farm off of that pressure from the Scepter in the next couple minutes.
How about on the flip side, you talked about the ability to get a level or so ahead thanks to the funky purple buff start.
Right.
Does that, in your mind, kind of, is that really like a level 1 through 5 type of advantage, or does that kind of carry out throughout the entire laning phase, giving your ADC solo experience?
It'll definitely stay relevant throughout the laning phase. It definitely falls off in terms of how much it actually feels like it matters beyond the first backs. Up until everyone's back for the first time, I would say it feels pretty relevant. Once you back and buy, your full Thebes, your full Spikes, your full Sob, and your full, Transcendence or Devour's Gauntlets, it's all said and done.
Captain Twig here at level 4. Doesn't have Fear No Evil. Better believe he's got some damage, though. Cyclone Spin, Lepton, and Netrioid, First Blood. Aurora dashing away. Oh, the level from Captain Twig. Is that enough onto Aurora? Root, yes, all of it connecting. If you're going to kill Aurora, it's going to happen now. And the Camelot Kings time that rotation perfectly. And it's hand-delivered by Captain Twig.
So fortunate that Twig is able to get that level 5 ultimate as well after that first kill. He knew he was going to be able to get that ult and finish that kill off. But a great timed rotation to come over there and grab First Blood. Awesome that he's able to get that ultimate and ultimately get another kill over there. Great start for the Kings over there in the duo lane. This is a team that I am not necessarily feeling like I lose the game against when I give them a lead, but it's going to become very oppressive very fast on that side of the map.
Right, you're certainly not getting the lead if you're the Titans. Would love to pull one back on a big man Ting's. Layers still level 4, though. It doesn't have the Typhoon for setup or follow-up. As Captain Twig has felt comfortable, Paul will help his jungler.
He's feeling himself.
Who is?
Captain Twig.
Captain Twig, yeah. Look, because I talked a bit on the desk about how Twig, people say, oh, he's facilitator jungler, and he does that very well, don't get me wrong. in Hunbats can be that style of pick, but also really starts to get into the mood on this Hunbats pick. Love it for Captain Twig. But Layers at level 5 now. Maybe can assist with some blue buff pressure over here on the right side of the map. Said maybe just a totem of coup battle.
Great cage.
So an early cage from Variety forces out the ultimate from SOT, and wouldn't you guess it, blue buff goes down quietly, but is Layers okay with that? No, dashes into Variety, Typhoon flies through, and Variety hits the stun. Layers unable to finish off the kill, and the Titans empty-handed over on the blue buff.
The Kings will take that. That's what they call them, an objective-based team. You see that cage to zone out the Guan ultimate from SOT coming in, trying to kind of punch back and steal back the blue after he lost his zone. Cage keeping him out so Captain Twin can finish that buff, and ultimately they survive. So that's a giant win for the Kings there, Dave.
Yeah, feels fantastic early on. Now, Aurora, I was looking last game. Remember, we had a few of the shells. We were talking about needing Phantom Shell up against the cage, things like that. I think by the end of that game, only one of them actually became a Phantom Shell. I don't know if Paul or Cyclone Spin had the chance to upgrade theirs. Ends up being a Sunder first pickup this game from Aurora. Obviously, some shielding for the Camelot Kings, but in your mind, is that a direct Variety relic pickup here for Aurora, or is there value elsewhere?
My guess is that one of the big switch-ups that the Titans are going to make this game is they want to have a little bit more ability to kind of like finish off some of these kills. Last game, you saw a lot of people getting low, and they were just never really able to finish off kills, even if they found a tank with no dash up. They weren't really able to finish them off, so this seems like an in-set adjustment for Aurora to grab that Sunder, which I do think is quite strong right now, just so that way they have a little bit more of an option to isolate and kill these frontliners later on in the game.
Brief 1v1 between Cyclone Spin and Netrioid. Ultimates exchanged. And still that one level lead for Net on the back end of the 2 kills for the Camelot Kings over on the left side of the map. And once we start to get towards, 10 or so minutes, we're still like 4, 5, 6 minutes away from potentially that first rotation of objectives. But that, you got to imagine, Hurry, is a big adjustment here for the Titans, where first Pyro, first Gold Fury, really on point with it, knowing how fast the Kings can shred those down. Twig at his own blue dove on Fear No Evil, buys time, but Layers has got damage to spare. A double stun stops Genetics right where he's at, and now Variety attempting to help out his support. He's got the Interceptor. Can that make a difference?
Huge game.
Needs to. The body blocks from the Tartarus Titans slow down Variety. Here's the Abduct. Big Man Tings on the rotation in from mid, and the DOT from Genetics grabs the kill. Sot will dash away. The rest of the Titans will as well. And all that sustain needed ends up being a 1-for-1, and both junglers go down.
Yeah, crazy fight, Dave. And I'm a little curious by Twig why he decided to hold off on that ultimate, put himself in a position to get picked up with no beads for his starter relic, putting his team in a little bit of an awkward position, but a great cage out by Variety sort of saves that team fight, and some great rotations by the Titans to sort of turn things around. Twig jumping in mid.
Yeah, he's going to get abducted, though. Technically not abducted, but pulled by Aurora. Abduct is it's individual, it's a Kepri.
That's right.
But the pull in from Aurora does make Captain Twig a bit uncomfortable. So that's got to be a target. You make a really good point there with no beads on Captain Twig for 5 or so more levels. If you are the Titans, are you honing in on that? Are you thinking that you've got a good matchup into this Hunbats here for the next few minutes?
It's always just an option that you got to keep in mind. That's something that you communicate with your team. The Titans definitely have registered that he does not have beads. That's why you see Aurora really chasing him out there, knowing that he's a pretty easy kill if he does end up getting hit by any kind of hard CC. There you go. Layers taking it this time. Thank goodness for all the junglers of the world. You know now that it is okay for you to take that Scepter if you go over there and help your team out. Ultimately, I think that they thought that Scepter in the duo lane early was probably a little more useful than for Layers. Now they are giving it to him as he roams around the map. Cage coming out on SOT. We've seen this before. Saw actually falling kind of low. Does have the horse. He's been very patient with these ultimates, Dave. Yep. He's done a great job of getting himself out of these bad situations. And I'm happy to see that too, because Sot is a player that you want him to be feeling good. You want him to be feeling strong going into this mid game and his late game, especially on this Guan Yu like we talked about last game.
Yep.
And he does get out again. So I'm curious to see the Titans or the Kings continue to make this play, trying to kill this Guan Yu, especially since it hasn't worked out, I don't think, even one time in this set. But ultimately, you know, I do like to see the aggression. It is nice to put the Odin Cage on cooldown, maybe put a little bit of pressure on the side of the map. Just a little reminder to Sot that we will kill you if you step out of position.
That's right, and Sot had just, you know, maybe a couple of waves prior teleported to that lane, so I suppose had to walk all the way back, potentially a little ebb and flow of experience over there on the right side of the map, and a decent XP per minute lead, about 20 or so. Variety is ahead of SOT, so it doesn't culminate in a level lead, call it about a half a level early in this game. Now, both of these teams in game one happy to play a little bit slower. I mean, we went into the 20-minute mark with a kill line that looked almost exactly like this. Genetics opting for Shoguns with his second item pickup in game one, and man,
we're back.
We're hammering Sot. Don't have the
No
Odin Cage yet, but do have Fear No Evil. Sot, fearing no evil, walks towards Captain Twig. Blue buff not up on either side.
That was clever.
Yeah, and so clever just to see if you can get Sot to play a bit further forward. Captain Twig holds on to his ultimate and heads on back. So the first rotations of these neutral objectives now up, Hurrywind. You got Pyromancer on one side, Gold Fury on the other. And the Titans, this is where they got to be proactive, right? You don't want to give the Kings any free time around these objectives, and so a smart pull by the Tartarus Titans and no answer on the Gold Fury by the Kings.
And that's why you'll see that aggression come out around this 10-minute mark on the solo side of the map, is because even if you don't get kills, as long as you win the engagement, you'll get that Pyromancer. It's so easy to do. Paul potentially caught out here a bit. Will be forced to beats. AMC all come out, won't be enough damage. That breastplate putting in work there. Unfortunately, Paul not easy enough to kill. Variety looking behind.
Whoa.
Huge humbots out.
Oh my god! Twig from stage left uses the Scarab's Blessing to get out. Variety doesn't have the damage. And Paul with the sustain trying to get away. He will. My goodness, Aurora saves the life of his mid laner. A sliver of HP is all Paul had left. The dive started off great. The Fear No Evil, wonderful. The cage,
Nerves of
helpful.
steel.
But Paul stares it down, walks away. That's another kill for the Titans. You wonder, with the sustain, if you're immediately going to this Gold Fury.
Yeah, and I think they will be looking, especially after that one fight in mid, they're probably getting a lot of confidence. I will say that is a big mental breaker for the Kings to commit that much to that hell just to see her not die. I do think the Titans are going to be feeling themselves now. I would not be surprised if they run objective to objective here. They do pull this Gold Fury. Something relatively fast, half HP. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a reset into a fight here.
Netroid's around the back. Yeah, that'd be risky to rotate all the way through. Well, Fury is slowed down. Genetics pulled in by Aurora. Genetics scurries away. No Scarab's Blessing on the map just yet. Layers with the first, but Netroid re-engages. 3 members of the Titans
Big jump.
left running. Cage traps in 3. Do the Kings have the cleave? They sure do. But Netroid hands the double over to Layers. Layers grabs a third. Layers with the quad. It's big man Tings. Layers wants the 5th. The Titans swept aside in game 1. Layers, won't get the penta. Big man Tings trades out. SOT on the respawn. My goodness. And Sot, the last one left on the map.
That's the craziest fight I think I've seen all year.
I'm gonna throw up.
That was insane. When's the last time we've seen someone trade like that as they die?
Never.
I don't know if I've
Never.
ever seen that. That is insane. I thought Layers for sure with that ultimate was gonna have the pentakill as well.
Yeah.
What a crazy back and forth fight, especially after that big cage. I thought the Titans were done for. After that, Paul actually managing to survive in another cage and continue to get heals off, ended up making that fight super close. Just giant team fight ultimates from both teams. I think the Titans chasing a little too far forward and having to come back originally, getting a little too crazy about killing Genetics, split that fight up. But ultimately, just a crazy back and forth fight, Dave. I mean, how often do you get to see that? Just amazing stuff.
Yeah, you don't. My goodness. 4 for Layers. Paul snags one at the back end of that fight. Big man Tings end up being massive for the Kings in that fight as well. The AMC, the one doing a lot of the big swinging on the other side. I think we've got a moment, unless Captain Twig is going to try to dive out Cyclone Spin here. Fear No Evil, a rare miss. Twig has been really on point with those, and I'll see what Aurora gets done, because I do at some point want to take a look at Layers' perspective, and maybe now get a brief opportunity to see exactly what Layers saw around that Gold Fury fight. Picks up a quadra kill. All started with that one here, Hurrywind. And it was the
Yeah, he
to
catches
re-engage after the
genetics.
fact.
They did overcommit a little bit on this kill, but he does come back and get a great flank, and he still has his ultimate. Picks up Netroid really quick, picks up Variety really quick. This AMC, unfortunately, is really big. To me, right here, it looks like he's got it. But
Right,
big
I'm
man
thinking for sure.
deserves a steal as well, holding his ground. 2v1.
Wow.
Takes him out right at the end here as well. Just an amazing fight from Layers, a quadra kill, almost a pentakill.
Almost.
And a very even fight, Dave. Very cool to see.
That would have been the most ridiculous first-time caster luck I've ever seen in my entire life. You get a penta in your
It's not luck
your
if it
first
happens every time.
Yeah,
One for one, baby.
That's right, you're 100% at that point. You get a quad in a ridiculous team fight, one of the most chaotic and high-octane fights we've gotten this year in general. Haven't seen that in a long, long time, if ever. And the Titans, in the meantime, will quietly pick up the gold. After what happened at the Gold Fury a moment ago, the fact that there was zero pushback,
Yeah.
surprising to me. But that does even up the game almost exactly, like 10 or 20 gold maybe separating these two teams. Experience dead even as well. So I'll pose the same question to you here as I did in game one, Hurry. We are dead even at 15 minutes. Compositionally, who do you think's in a more comfortable spot?
I think this game, for sure.
Or is it just execution?
It has to be the Titans.
Right, okay.
Execution is going to come down to it. I do think the Ishtar late game compared to the Hoi we had last game, and I think the Susano compared to the Thor we had last game, will make these team fights a little bit easier for the Titans. That's why they switched their draft. Those are the two picks they changed, and this is where they struggled last game. Are they going to let the Kings pull objectives and burn them before they're on time again? The Pyromancer are going to go down. I'm sure they're not too worried about that, but the Fire Giant is what's on the table now, and that is what I'm worried about. It is still a little bit early for a Fire Giant, but you see these early groupings already. The teams know the drill. They were here last game.
We've seen this story before. Not as early, unless I'm misremembering. I thought it was a second item Shoguns for genetics in game one. Was early in that build at some point. So you don't have it. That's super helpful, obviously, in burning down objectives, which is why I bring it up.
Yeah, he will need that at some point for sure,
right?
with that team comp.
Surprised Netroid didn't go back into Shadow Steel this game. That was helpful with some anti-heal.
Right.
Or do you think comfortable enough with the Kings and their anti-heal that exists, you don't need that itemization slotted in?
Yeah, I'm a little bit curious about that decision to change that off. He does decide to go for the Kins into a more traditional build here, which I assume will be the Oboe next. I assume it has a character thing for him. Maybe on the Hoi he wants to stick towards this style of build. So I'm sure he has some framework of mind in deciding that. So I'm sure as the Hoi, he just kind of wants to make sure he's bringing down tanks with that mark.
Right.
It does make a lot of sense with the AMC backline. It's basically another ADC this game as well compared to the Kurnos last game. That's going to be good at burning down tanks with their friendly ADC, so no surprise that he goes for this build ultimately.
Ooh, uh-oh. Watch out, Aurora. Maybe watch out, Variety. That is, you know, the visuals of Ishtar. You get these giant lightning strikes that just chunk down health bars. It is really awesome. Double cage from Variety into a double Fear No Evil. It's only Aurora who takes the full brunt of it. Back in! Goes SOT, and the Typhoon from Layers forces the Scarab's Blessing by Variety. This tier 1 tower better be worth it from both of these two teams because we're fighting over it. And the last few auto attacks crash in. And we did see this a bit in game one. These big kind of bursty initiations with everyone staying alive.
And it's going to be, the only things that are going to be different this game are going to be those changed picks from the previous game. You can already see them making their impact. This Ishtar ult came out a bit late, but still you can see the potential of this ability. The Susano may be in trouble, speaking of which. I don't know if Harry will have this stun. It does come up. He doesn't unfortunately have time to cast the whole thing. They're cutting him off low though.
Does force blink
out. I do think that should be enough to get him out here.
I don't know,
especially with Salt playing Interceptor here. We'll be forcing the ultimate.
Kind of an awkward moment for the Titans on the right side of the map. Force some disengage, force the blink out of Layers. Puts the Kings in position to put some damage into this tier 2 on the right side of the map. And an abduct onto a roar. Scurries away. Stun from Variety, no good. Pull from a roar, same result. There is no Fear No Evil from Captain Twig here. Low on mana as genetics. You don't have much. You're kind of scraping by. You haven't gone back and reset the map just yet. And now, finally, the Kings will take a deep breath. Probably smart by the Titans, though. Make sure that they actually go back and are not left unattended around the FG.
Right, and you saw Netroid pushing out waves there and left, I assume, trying to get to some power spike in his build, which I assume will be this Oboe. Maybe they're getting to the point now, especially closing in on 20 minutes, where they're going to be looking to potentially burn down this Fire Giant Captain Twig will be a late reset here, so they won't be looking to pull the Fire Giant anytime soon. But there's a lot happening there, Dave,
Sure was.
for a lot of nothing.
Yeah.
And that's honestly been the story of these games, especially with Sustain coming out from the Titans. So I do want to see where this goes in this game. These fights are really crazy. They're really close. They're super back and forth. It's not really ever going distinctly in one team's favor. Last game, we saw them just resort to burning down a Fire Giant in order to escape this dance around the Fire Giant. I'm curious to see what their plan is going to be this game.
You know, that's where the Titans have to adjust as well, because it was the one momentary let off from around the FG when the Kings pulled and burnt it down. That the Titans just for a moment said, all right, well we can back and reset. Weren't able to. Oni Fury around as well. So often we see teams sort of shift their mind to it. Good ward coverage by the Kings over on right. I was wondering if they would just send everyone over to the FG. 3 members of the Titans. Is this enough time, though? That ends up being the question. 3 members of the Titans left
you see
on the Fury.
Variety trying to intercept them,
blocking off. Walls down. Phantom Shell used. Fire Giant started by the Camelot Kings. Aurora close by. Aurora just gets turned and burned by the Camelot Kings, but here comes Sot right down Main Street. The Fear No Evil onto 2 of the squishies by Captain Twig. No ults remaining for the Camelot Kings except that Scarab's Blessing. You can dive a little deeper and a bit more aggressive when you got that on your side. Sot forced to use the beads, and all that for 1. The Oni Fury over to the Titans in the meantime.
And that was just well played by the Kings. They realized they didn't quite have enough time to burn that Fire Giant before Aurora was going to be able to come in. They are going back to it, though. And they can maybe get it now, especially with that pick that they got. They still have all this Fire Giant burn. They have the Odin Stim. They have the Khepri Shred. They have the 2 Hunters.
No. Sot! Oh, that was close, but Sot does not steal it away. He's abducted. He's burned. And Captain Twig adds another. It is such a similar story to the first game. A momentary backpedal by the Titans. Pays off huge for the Kings. All 5 members with FG and a double kill for Captain Twig.
And you got to feel for these frontliners on the Titans just having to Hail Mary run in just to try to get them off the Fire Giant. It's the same situation as last game, Dave. I really am surprised that the Titans put priority on this Oni Fury with the Fire Giant up, especially after how last game went. Ultimately, they do pay the price, and unfortunately, their frontliners are the ones who kind of have to go in and just die for free, basically, in an attempt to get them off the Fire Giant. Yeah, I don't know. This is the same thing that happened last game, Dave, with them just pulling these Fire Giants and burning them without being able to get much of a response.
And what happened in the first game was then we knocked down all these towers. The gold lead starts to get out of control, and it just never really looked close down the stretch for the Tartarus Titans, unfortunately. A lot of this weight's got to be on layers now. It's 6-3-1. The Susano.
Wow.
Just so strong and putting together a great performance. Now, granted, 4 of those were in one team fight. Doesn't take anything away from the KDA, but one big bursty team fight adds a lot. With Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower in mid and only the Tier 2 over on left and plenty of time to play with now for the Camelot Kings, maybe wait a bit of time for some of those relics to come back up. But we mentioned a couple of the small pivots. Really, it's, again, Cyclone Spin and layers that look different. Does the base defense, in your mind, look all that different from game 1 here for the Titans, or more of the same in your mind?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because what they did last game was they split here. They had Twig in mid. They had Variety blink between the Phoenixes and kind of cage them, panic rotating to defend the mid lane, and they ended up getting a great team fight off of that. So we'll see if they kind of mirror that same game plan. Maybe that was an impromptu thing. Maybe, and instead, this game, we're actually going to see Variety potentially being the one pushing mid.
All right, flipped.
I do think that was a pretty good game plan for them the previous game. It definitely caught the Titans off guard. Maybe they'll be looking to do something a little bit different since they already kind of showed their cards on that one. So we'll have to see what they do. I do really like the split play. It did work well for them with this double hunter composition, as we talked about previous game as well. They do have a lot of burn on these Phoenixes. They don't need a lot of time. They just need the backdoors to be gone in about a few seconds, and they will have a Phoenix here. So let's see how they play it, Dave.
Yeah, no more towers remaining. 3 Phoenixes on the map, and an ultimate and a blink from Variety and both Captain Twig for initiation. If that's what the Kings are looking for underneath any of these Phoenixes. There's going to be Variety hovering alone. Shogun's picked up by Genetics, and so the sudden turn and burn around these Phoenixes is going to be heavy. Aurora abducted. Aurora didn't need the Fear No Evil, but pays off anyway. And now it's a 5v4. for the Camelot Kings. Triple stun from Cyclone Spin, but there's no follow-up. And the left side Phoenix goes down. Layers on the chase, but Layers hits the eject button. The Kings got almost what they came for. I lied. A couple more autos.
They're coming back. Still
needed. But at this point, you got to imagine the Kings going to be able to get it. They sure do.
Oh.
And Twig with the bounce. Oh, it's
downtown.
devastating for Cyclone Spin. And suddenly the Titans down to only 3 members of their team, needing to resustain back in the fountain.
And excellent execution from the Kings. You can tell they know what they want to do at these
Yep.
sieges. Variety catching out multiple members, trying to rotate to the left side Phoenix. Let them get the Phoenix super low before the fight even started. And then also bursting down Aurora, who unfortunately didn't get much time to play there, I think, being erased off the map with that AMC ultimate. Looking to get this mid Phoenix here. It is falling quite low. Netroid being forced to jump out. Genetics
Oh my
actually
God.
looking and
Oof.
saw it. That's his beads.
Yep, I thought it was going to happen again to Sot. Probably would have happened again to Sot if the beads didn't come out immediately. Be careful, Paul. You've lost your beads. Has to cleanse and dash away. Mid lane Phoenix falls as well. Variety has gone in, but Phantom
These
Shell now
stages.
used by a couple. Typhoon hits a few. Genetics uses the Scarab's Blessing. Netrion on the killing spree. Big man Tings with one as well. Variety low on health, but full on mana, full on support. Paul, fear no evil. The Camelot Kings have come to play. No Penta for Layers. No wins for the Tartarus Titans, and the Camelot Kings grab themselves a 2-0. My goodness, happens again. It's such a similar story, isn't it, Hurrywin, to game number 1. To such an objective-minded, clean team here for the Camelot Kings. And the Titans, they made their plays, but just too clean ultimately from the Kings.
It was a big case of deja vu, unfortunately, for the Titans today.
Yep.
I think those drafts being run back ultimately ended up favoring the Kings. That 4 physical composition not really holding them back in a way that you might expect. So just did a great job, honestly, stuck to their game plan, ran back the Phoenix Seed strategy, and ultimately came up with another dub here.
Yeah, I was a little worried, admittedly, about forfeits. You know, you talked about how important that AMC was to the overall composition. I think remains super pivotal to the Camelot Kings in their comp here in game number 2. Man, this Kings team looks good. Who knows what to make of the top 4 in the SPL right now. Everybody beating everybody, and another good win here for the Camelot Kings. Hurry, it was an absolute pleasure on the cast with you. The Camelot Kings, they take the 2-0 over the Tartarus Titans. And I think we're going to track me back here one last time to close out the day.
Yeah, well, while Dave makes his way over here, I can help fill the void a little bit. But the Camelot Kings do find themselves the 2-0 victory. And very similar light to game number 1. A bit of a slow burn in the early game, though notably a lot more kills come around this time, especially the fact that we get a quadra kill plus a triple kill by BMT, nearly a full double deicide, something that's so rare to see in and of itself again there. So a lot of history kind of being made around that one little Gold Fury fight. But again, it does kind of come down, Dave, to really the ending team fights where there's just too much damage from the Camelot Kings. There's a ton of sustain from the Titans, but they just don't have the damage to fight back into it. They're lacking that little bit of punch. The Susanoo helps shore that up for the early game. For the late game, find some massive Typhoons, especially around that mid lane, that mid Phoenix defense at the very end. But there's just no follow-up on it. When you have a giant Typhoon, you want something like an Earthshaker to crash down. You want a Raw Beam or a Thought Final Judgment, something to go with it. But unfortunately for him, his backup is Paul, who in the last little bit of that team fight was forced back out, had to go to the fountain because he had 0 mana going back into that fight.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Camelot Kings, we've known for a long time, and this is another iteration on how clean of a team they are. Of course, there's the chaotic fight around the Gold Fury, but it's, you know, it's not like a super hidden game plan, right? It's double Hunter. You get a Shoguns, and you want to scrap it out. And the Titans, unfortunately, fell victim to the burn just way too often here in this game. I think again the AMC super pivotal to the way that this composition worked. Could potentially have considered a pick or a ban if you were the Tartarus Titans in that regard. And I think Captain Twig deserves a nod here in this one, J-Mac. The Hun Bats, in my mind, alongside the AMC, a couple very, very important pieces in making this Kings draft work.
Yeah, I mean, this Hun Bats was one of the missing pieces that the Kings do need. When you draft a composition that's super pick-oriented like this one, I mean, the Odin, sure, he's got the area to catch a bunch of people in, but you need somebody to help kind of capitalize off that. Big Man Tings is able to make the individual damage to find those frontliners to really help be able to shred them down.
Yep.
But when it came to dealing with the carries, the squishier members of the team, that's where Captain Twig really has to pull the extra weight because he's one of the only actual CCs on this team. Sure, you got Odin, single target stun. Stinger from AMC, single target cripple and a slow. Kepri, unless you catch multiple people at that route, likely only grabbing the one, pluck back is also going to be single target. So it really came down to Captain Twig to find big moments in fights, especially like the one we saw where he's diving at the end of the Titan there, to be able to fear no evil 2 or 3 people at a time, to be able to set up for not only himself, but for the rest of the team to go through there. Big nods to Big Man Tings, because once again, looking at that one, it's another composition, again, essentially mirroring game number 1, where if that is not an AMC, they don't get to make the picks that they did that game.
Yeah, well, Kings fans feeling good after this one. You know, I mean, when everyone's trying to keep pace with the Jade Dragons right now, the Oni Warriors have looked clean, needed to see a great performance from the Kings, and you got one against a very good team in the Tartarus Titans. So the Camelot Kings finish out our day here on SPL Saturday. That means we've got a triple header just around the corner, and it's a very important one. Bolts versus Jade Dragons. Talk about separating teams at the top of the standings, trying to separate out the standings a little bit. And really, J-Mac for the Bolts, stemming the bleeding. It has not been a good phase for this Bolts team so far. Need to get something going. Need to get a 3-game set against the Dragons if you're not going to win it. And same probably could be said for the Solar Scarabs up against the Oni Warriors. And the Kings, once again, back in action against the Leviathans. Who do you think more desperate for a win right now between the Bolts and the Scarabs?
Honestly, I really do feel like it's the Olympus Bolts who are
I
the most
agree.
desperate one for them, because
I
this is
would
a
say
team
Bolts.
who was at the top just prior. I mean, this was a top 4 team. This is a team who was sitting in even at least the top 2 coming in towards the Masters tournament of phase number 2. They've had a single roster change by losing out Haddix and now bringing in Baskin, so they haven't had to make the dramatic shifts that the Solar Scarabs have had to do. They haven't had to go through nearly the kind of drama that the Solar Scarabs have been facing over the course of their last 2 years. For the Olympus Bolts, this is a big one for them. They need to get, again, I think you said it perfectly, if they can't find a set win over the Dragons, needs to go to game 3. If they can't get it to a game 3 and it at least goes 35, 40 minutes and it's a close one, will help out. But I think that the Olympus Bolts, this is one of the most desperate games that they need to win. They got their win over the Scarabs, got a loss over the Valkyries, which is normally a team that they in the past have been able to handle no problem here. So if they can't find anything against the Jade Dragons, if they go up at later matchups, where they're facing some of the other top teams out there, if they still can't stand up to the top teams, we might be looking at a potential bottom 3 Bolts for the remainder of this phase.
Yeah, which is a weird thought considering
It's
how the
not something
middle
I would
of
have
the
thought
year
I'd ever
looked
say.
for the Olympus Bolts. The top 4 back in action tomorrow, and so when you're looking at the Jade Dragons at 4-1, the Camelot Kings at 4-1, 3-1 for both the Oni Warriors and the Leviathans. Only the Levi's playing the Kings, so only those two can kind of knock one another off in the top 4. A whole lot of fun to be had tomorrow. We had a whole lot of fun here today as well. I've been Dolson, that's been J-Mac. Currywind helped us out a bit today. We thank him for that. On behalf of all of us, everyone back in production, thanks for watching, and we will see you tomorrow morning.